Welcome to episode 272 of Sports Geek. On this week's episode, I discuss the machinations of building a global football charity match with Lou Sticca.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who is thankful for reaching 500,000 downloads, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. And yes, I am so thankful. 500,000 downloads. That is absolutely awesome. I do appreciate you, whether you have downloaded the podcast for the very first time or you've done it over 200 times. I really do appreciate it. My name is Sean Callanan. I am your host. You can find me and all things about Sports Geek at our website, sportsgeekhq.com. You can find the podcast on all good podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and as you know by now, if you have been listening for a while, my favourite podcast app, and it should be yours, Pocket Casts. It is available there. And as always, you can sign up for Sports Geek News at sportsgeekhq.com. And if you want to send me an email or contact me in any way, you can do it via email, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com or at Sean Callanan on most social media platforms, Twitter, LinkedIn, and the like. I don't use Snapchat that much, but I'm still on there. At Sean Callanan on most. So, again, thank you very much. Very humbled by reaching a milestone. It has been a target for a little while on the horizon, and 500,000. It's a big number. I'm really proud, and also what is in year what is 6? I think it is 6 or 7 maybe. I need to check my numbers. 270 odd episodes in, the numbers and the download numbers are still going up. I've had a really strong start to 2020. So thank you for those who are new to the podcast, and thank you for those who have been here since episode 1. Before I jump into my chat with Lou Sticca, just a big shout out to all the people who have supported the podcast via Patreon. You can go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon and help support, pay for all of those downloads. Yes, we've got to pay for the bandwidth for those downloads, so it helps pay for the costs. You can be a supporter 3 different ways. You can be a personal supporter for as little as $4 a month. For that, you get 4 podcasts a month. You get some Q&A podcasts. You get some Sports Geek news emails. A lot of value for $4. And if you're a brand that wants to reach the sports digital technology executives, you can do so by being a silver or gold supporter. So go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon to do that. Now, my guest today is Lou Sticca. He's really he's a football power broker here in Australia. We talk a lot about his career in the world of football here in Australia, or soccer, as some people might call it, and his career as being an agent and also organising tours of international teams to the Australian market, and now he is organising Football for Fires. For those of you, and thank you for those of you who have reached out, our country was on fire for a large portion of early part of 2020. And so discuss with Lou why he started the Football for Fires initiatives and what he hopes it becomes on May 23 when it does happen. So here is my chat with Lou Sticca. Very happy to be here at the home of Tribal Sports Group, surrounded by a plethora of football jerseys in the offices of Lou Sticca. Welcome to the podcast, Lou.
Thank you very much, Sean.
Want to touch base with you and have a chat about the Football for Fires game that you're organising for May. But before we sort of get into that, so people know who you are, how did you get your start in the world of sport?
Goes back quite a way. Always been a fan. So first and foremost, my motivation for being involved is because I love sport.
Yep.
And I love my soccer. I love my AFL. And it was out of those two loves actually that gave me my first foray into the business of sport.
Yep.
Back in the mid-90s, I came up with the idea of Carlton Soccer Club.
So Carlton being an AFL powerhouse here in Australia?
So I'd grown up weekends. My normal weekend as a young teenager was to to go to Princess Park to watch the mighty Carlton Football Club at 2:00 on a Saturday afternoon.
Yep.
And then on the Sunday at 3:00, over to Olympic Park to watch Brunswick Juventus.
So in the early 80s, if you probably were a member, so you didn't buy a ticket, but I actually sold tickets at Princess Park in the early 90s.
Oh, there you go.
$12.50 it was for an adult and $2.50 if you're under 15. I still remember the prices.
Well, the boss who ran the stadium then is still there now, a guy called Marty Shannon.
Yeah,
just in
Marty,
case.
Yeah, Marty Shannon got me the gig.
There you go.
His sister is my auntie.
There you
it's
go.
a sister-in-law. So, yeah, so
There
that's
you go.
a small world.
It is a small world. So my love for the two codes ran side by side. And it was actually, I got the idea of starting a soccer club with them is really interesting because in 1993, so it started as a young teenager following the Carlton Football Club behind the goals.
Yep.
And then working my way around the stadium, wanted to get into the social club, so became a member of the social club, and then from there joined the Carlton Coterie.
Yep.
And one of the great benefits and attractions of joining the Carlton Coterie was that it gave us admission into the change rooms before, during and after the game. So as a fan, to actually be able to get into the rooms at any of those times was an incredible benefit. I started to observe a lot of the faces inside the Carlton change rooms, the hierarchy, the people of influence, the sponsors, were people that were, you would say, could be faces that you would see at the soccer.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that, there were a lot of people of ethnic extraction, Italian like myself. There were a lot of Lebanese, a lot of the Jewish community, people that were obviously in love with the Carlton Football Club, were pumping in significant financial support. And it sort of really just stuck out at me that these were people that probably would have followed soccer at some point in their life.
And it's very much when the AFL, and before the AFL, it was Victorian Football League, and it was very suburban. So
Correct.
Everyone who was following Carlton was from the Carlton area, from Lygon Street, which is a famous part of Melbourne, all the Italian restaurants. So that was a lot of, Carlton's fan base came from that area.
100%. You're in Sydney Road,
Yep.
Which then introduced a lot of the Turkish and Lebanese families.
And it was the playing zones too. That's where the players were recruited from. So a lot of Italian players played for Carlton.
That's right, exactly. It was. I must admit, I really enjoyed footy or Aussie rules when it was VFL.
Yep.
It coincided with Carlton also being very successful. So let me say that right up front. But so it started to germinate that the idea of this football club, Carlton Football Club, 100 years of history, fantastic stadium, huge support that came from many different groups. The 1993 grand final, I'm sitting in the grandstands, and I come up with an idea, and it sort of moved me to actually write to Ian Collins and John Elliott. Ian Collins was the CEO at the time. John Elliott was the president, and I wrote to the guys and I said, look, for the reasons that I've just outlined, fantastic club, great history. It has many similarities with clubs like Liverpool in England and some of the famous clubs around world football. Why couldn't we start our own soccer club? 3 or 4 weeks went by, never heard anything, and then all of a sudden I get an envelope from the Carlton Football Club with a letter signed by John and by Ian saying, great idea, we've already registered the name, come in and see us.
Yep.
Lo and behold, so the next 3-4 years we started to put the ideas together. We met with David Hill, who was the chairman of Soccer Australia in those days, and it was decided that we'd go into the NSL, the National Soccer League, in the season commencing 1997.
Yep.
The year before us, Collingwood Football Club had also gone into it, but theirs was a slightly different model. It was actually it was Heidelberg Soccer Club that were allowed to play out of Collingwood and rename themselves as Collingwood Warriors. It was a bit of a hybrid. It wasn't
more of a takeover.
It was more of a rental agreement more than anything else.
Yep.
So it was, and they started off like a house on fire, Collingwood that is.
Yep.
And then within a couple of weeks, people saw that it wasn't really Collingwood Football Club, that it was still Heidelberg, and for whatever the reasons, it sort of fell apart.
Yep.
And so it made our entry the following year a little bit more challenging because people didn't really understand how committed the Carlton Football Club were to this project. And to be completely frank with you, theirs was also built on, we've got a great facility, it's dormant, so many weekends, what a great idea. We start the Carlton Soccer Club, we control it through the Carlton Cricket and Social Club.
Yep.
The place gets used another 13, 14 times. And to be fair, really, really supportive. They gave us access to, they redeveloped a change room underneath the Chandler grandstand. They gave us their football finance department, their membership department. So it was just incredible support, and it was a really, really good project to commence together.
Yep. And do you think, was the concept too early? Because we're seeing all of that happening 25 years later with teams having AFL and AFLW and
netball.
Some having netball and sort of following that model of the Barcelonas that have teams in multi-sports and sort of being this bigger team. Was it just too early in this market, do you think?
It's pretty scary when I think back. We were sold a bit of a lemon, and what by that I mean the TV rights.
Yep.
And when I say scary, it actually has a bit of a deja vu feeling to it with some of the things that are going on today.
With the A-League and things like that, yeah.
And maybe we'll come back to that further down the podcast. But to go back, so David Hill was a pretty strong character, no stronger, no less or more stronger than John Elliott.
Yep.
They actually hit it off really well, two peas in a pod. But we were sold a bit of a lemon. The TV rights at that time had just been handed over to Channel 7, who in their wisdom warehoused it.
Okay.
So the TV product as such was non-existent. David Hill had gone on a bit of a warpath with trying to de-ethnicize the game, and so had undermined a lot of the traditional clubs. And that probably created a bit of a resentment for the Carlton Soccer Club, seen as the newbies coming in, and a lot of the traditional clubs felt that we were taking up someone else's spot that wasn't deserved, and that we were part of David Hill's new program to cleanse the sport. So it wasn't a good time. In actual fact, it became evident almost immediately that we'd probably been sold a lemon, and that maybe that wasn't the right time to have come in.
And it was just the timing of where football was, like you said, it was trying to go through that transition period. It was pre-A-League and all of those types of things. So that's your experience to go into sport. So coming out of that process, you sort of went to the agency side? Is that where you sort of went?
So basically what happened is the Carlton Soccer Club was sold by the Carlton Football Club.
Yep.
The reasons for that were there were political reasons. John was actually starting to become persona non grata with the AFL and even within the Carlton Football Club.
Yep.
So the wisdom at the time was to sell it, and at that point in time it was sold to a group of privateers that I didn't think were going to take the club forward. So I chose to resign and depart, and I took a couple of months to think about my future, and I started getting phone calls from players that I'd been the CEO at the Carlton Soccer Club. And they were coming to me saying, Luke, can you help me with my contracts? Some of the boys were moving to other clubs. Can you help me do this? And then in talking to my accountant, he said, look, if you're going to do this, you should do it right. Is there some sort of a licensing? As a result of that, in 2000, I became I sat for an exam, a FIFA player agent exam. I passed that and became what was known at the time as a FIFA player agent. and that was my change from running a club to sitting on the other side of the desk, actually starting to represent players.
Yep.
And I started as tribal sports management back in 2000, and that's been my business ever since. We've grown into other pillars, but that was born out of my involvement at the Carlton Soccer Club.
And so you've had a few like famous signings across the Australian football landscape, one being Alessandro Del Piero, getting him across to Sydney FC. What are some of the backwards and forwards and the meetings that have to happen to pull off that kind of signing? Because it was a massive coup at the time, but like it's not just a couple of messages or a couple of phone calls.
No, that one there was a really long one. But before we go into Alessandro, let me just say the one that I take a lot of pride in, and who undoubtedly set the A-League on a great course, was the first big signing in the A-League, and that was Dwight Yorke.
Yep.
So Dwight Yorke, out of England, having played for Manchester United, Aston Villa, was a household name. And so he was at Birmingham City. We got him out of there and over to Sydney FC, and that's probably one of my proudest moments.
Yep.
Because it was just the enormity of bringing a household name that we would follow on TV into a fledgling new competition called the A-League, and a new club called Sydney FC. That goes down, even to today, it goes down as probably right up there as one of the best deals that I've ever been involved with, because of not just for my own selfish reasons, but for what it did for the game.
Yep.
Alessandro Del Piero was 6 or 7 years later.
Yeah.
So the A-League had become established then.
So what was the conversation like? What was the pitch to Dwight compared it to Alessandro?
Okay, so that one, if my memory serves me correct, it's the power of association. At the time, we'd recruited Ian Crook, famous Englishman, played at Norwich, at Tottenham Hotspurs, and had grown up in the English game and was very well known. And he was good mates with Steve Bruce, who was managing Birmingham City at the time.
Yep.
We'd looked at Dwight's time at Birmingham and he wasn't getting a lot of game time. There was a lot of talk about him going away from Birmingham and moving over to Celtic and to other options. And in talking to Crookie, Crookie said, listen, here's Stephen Bruce's phone number. Why don't you give him a call?
Yep.
So I gave Stephen Bruce a call, said, Steve, blah, 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 Crookie, starting a new team, new comp. Any chance we could talk to Dwight? He was fantastic. If he helped facilitate it, we ended up speaking to Dwight, but he, in Dwight's inimitable way, very, very demure, very timid, said, look, I don't do anything without my agent. Here's my agent's number. Talk to my agent.
Yep.
We had some serious conversations and we put a pretty good case forward. And to be completely honest with you, they embraced it wholeheartedly, and exiting out of Birmingham was reasonably easy. So that was an easy deal to do, actually.
But you're also selling like the A-League as, hey, here we are. It's like you said, it was at the time still just starting out, and you sort of have to sell you can be one of the early stars and one of the foundation guys. Was that the pitch to Dwight?
Very much so, Sean. I mean, it had no history. It was a clean sheet of paper. And it would have gone along the lines of Dwight, the game needs you type of thing. And I use that line quite often, even today, with some of the other ventures that I do. I make no bones about it that we are Australia. We are very far. We're not mainstream football, but it's a great country. We have a lot of attributes, and people here love big names. So there would have been no question that really played on that heartstring with Dwight and his management.
And do you think, having guys like Dwight come out, having a good experience, the word of mouth in the football community? I know it's similar in basketball when you have basketball imports coming out and they say the lifestyle's great, everyone talks the same language, the beaches are great, and it's the lifestyle as well as the gameplay. Once that starts lifting, the conversation makes your conversations trying to recruit players a lot easier.
Very much so. The very fortunate thing with Dwight Yorke is a couple of years before, when the NSL was still, in operation, he actually came out for the awards night along with Mark Bosnich. So he'd been out to Sydney before. So it was something that for him, coming from Trinidad Tobago as well, given their love of cricket, Brian Lara, the whole cricket scene, Dwight's understanding of Australia was pretty advanced compared to a lot of other foreign players.
Yep. And so then convincing someone like Alessandro to come out to Sydney, what was that process like?
Okay, so in between Dwight and Alessandro, there were a couple of other big names that had come into the A-League. Sydney FC was a protagonist in most of these.
Yep.
Janino. I was involved with bringing Benito Carboni, an Italian player who only came across as a guest but made a really high impact. And Benito Carboni in Italy was well known.
Yep.
So that would have also played a part of the spiel that I used to Alessandro. But I suppose if we move to Alessandro, that was a very, very interesting process. I'd already started to build a relationship with the Juventus Football Club. With regards to other businesses, including some digital work that we did for them in Asia. Was also already in talks with Juventus about touring Australia. So I'd already built a reasonable rapport with management. And also, unashamedly, I'm a Juventus fan through and through.
Yep.
So I follow their scene pretty closely. And it was becoming evident that this was going to be, I think it was 2013, 2012. I've got to get my dates right, but it was going to be Alessandro's last year at Juventus, and it was public record that he wouldn't go to another Italian club, so he was going to move on and play football.
Yep.
So as far as I was concerned, well, that's as big enough of an opening that I need, and I'd use my contacts at Juventus to get his phone number, and I'd planned to be at Juventus for the last game of the season where they played Atalanta, and they were going to win the championship. So I'd reached out to Alessandro's brother, who was his agent, and I'd arranged a meeting the morning before the last home game and Alessandro's last game.
Yep.
So it was a pretty emotional period in Italy, especially in Turin. Alessandro Del Piero is almost godlike to Juventus fans.
Yep.
So I arranged this meeting at a very famous hotel where Juventus stay in the middle of Turin. Caught up with his brother, a gentleman called Stefano, and I sat there and I'd pre-planned my pitch. And basically I'd said, look, Stefano, I think Australia's a really good place for Alessandro to come and play. And I looked at him and I think he was really trying hard not to burst out laughing.
Yeah.
It was almost like he was biting his lips.
Yeah.
He was very, very polite. We finished the meeting. We exchanged email addresses and phone numbers, went and watched the game, came back to Australia and just kept on working. Every couple of weeks I'd send him an email.
Yep.
You know, I read that you might be going to America if you need any help. I was just really being a pain in the butt.
Yep.
I wouldn't leave him alone. Like a real dog with a bone.
Because that was a real serious option. Like a lot of football stars were going to MLS. You know, Beckham had done that earlier and had success at LA Galaxy. So that was a real option, wasn't it?
It was a big option. At the same time, Sydney FC had a new chief executive, Tony Pignata, who had come across from Wellington Phoenix. Tony's actually a Melburnian.
Yep.
Had run the Victorian Football Federation and done very well. That moved across to Wellington and had done extremely well. And I'd actually done a little bit of work with him with an LA Galaxy game and David Beckham.
Yep.
And he'd just taken over the reins over at Sydney FC, and I'd mentioned this to Tony, and I said, look, Tony, I've got a bit of a nibble. I've got a bit of an interest here.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's a nibble just yet, but there's definitely a dialogue underway. What do you think? So obviously he spoke to Scott Barlow and David Traktovenko and came back and said, look, Lou, we're really serious. Can you make this thing happen?
Yep.
So I increased my frequency of being a pain in the butt,
yep.
annoying Stefano about Alessandro. And then out of the blue, I got a bite.
Okay.
It was something along the lines of, now, Lou, tell me a bit more about Australia. And I reported that to Tony Pignata, and I said, Tony, you better start getting your ducks in a row here, because I actually think we've got a nibble. I think this is real.
Yep. And
it accelerated very, very quickly. We ended up having a couple of Skype sessions with Alessandro's brother, Stefano, and another layer of advisors. And I said to Tony, if this goes the way I think it'll go, it'll be something along the lines of get on a plane and get over here. And I'll never forget, Tony had actually flown from Sydney back to Melbourne because his family was still down in Melbourne.
Yep.
Had to come back here for something else. And I prearranged to do a Skype session at his house that night.
Yep.
With Alessandro's management. And at the end of the Skype session, it was exactly that. Get on a plane, get over here. So we frantically organise our flights.
Yep.
And so we're sitting on this plane trying to understand where this thing's going to go. And I said to Tony, they've arranged a driver at Milan Airport to pick us up. Now, if he's not there, I think it's a lemon. If he's there, I think this is real. Lo and behold, come out of customs, the chauffeur's there, Sticca, Pignata, to pick us up. So we get in the cab and off we go. And then it was just like the most surreal 24 hours pulling this thing together. So we had an initial dinner. No Alessandro, just with his brother and other advisors. It was prearranged to meet at a very famous office, the office of the original owner of Juventus, Gianni Agnelli, in the middle of the financial district of Turin. It was quite bizarre, and again, being a Juventus fan, goosebump territory. We start actually discussing dollars. Tony was on the phone every 5 minutes with Scott Barlow. Look, they need this, they want that. Can we do this? Can we do that? We basically got to a point where we had an agreement, and the door opens and Alessandro Del Piero walks in, shakes hands. We give him his shirt. I've got the photo still on my phone. Got the photo of him signing. Within 3 seconds of him signing, I've texted that photo to a number of media in Australia, and that photo, I should have copyrighted the photo because it went global. Yeah. We walk out of the offices and there were camera crews literally jumping out of the bushes, looking for comments. I mean, this was a bit of an unknown territory for us, for Tony. Tony had only just been made CEO, so it was pretty stressful and exciting at the same time. With management, we'd arranged to hold a major media conference the next day, again at a very historical point or place in Turin. It was the again the Juventus connection, the Agnelli family. They own Fiat. It was in this boardroom setup, and there would have been 300 to 400 media, camera crews. It was just incredible. It was so exciting for the game in Australia that I remember Daniel Garb, who was unknown in Australia but had already established himself in England doing TV. Yep. So Fox had flown him across. It was just an amazing experience to see, again, the way the media reacted to Alessandro signing for Sydney FC. It was a blur. Yep. It was exciting, but yeah, we made it happen.
So that's, I guess, a big part of what you've been doing, the agency life and the player agent and wheeling and dealing those deals. You've mentioned a couple of times a couple of the tours that you've been fortunate enough to bring out teams, Juventus among them, Tottenham, LA Galaxy. Those tours are now, we've had a really tough 2020 here in Australia. A lot of people have reached out asking about the fires that we had earlier in this year. and now we're in the midst of what the world is with the coronavirus. Australia was really hit hard with the bushfires. We were practically on fire. 20% of the country was on fire for nearly 6 weeks, which was ridiculous. Your response has been to set up Football for Fires and this match in May. How did that idea start? What did the plans for that event start? What were the first couple of calls you made when you said, this is what I want to do to raise some money and really help the people that have really been hurting because of the bushfires?
It was, you mentioned in LA Galaxy.
Yep.
So in 2007, remember in 2000 I became a FIFA player agent.
Yep.
In 2007 I also obtained another license called a FIFA match agent's license. And so I moved into the international games arena. And one of the first big ones that we did was LA Galaxy with David Beckham at ANZ Stadium, 85,000 people. The city was just besotted with him. We then went to Wellington and played another game, and then we had them out for a couple of other subsequent tours. So in that period, I'm starting to deal with a lot more international players, even though you're not talking to them about coming to play in Australia, but you're talking to them through their clubs or through other connections about tours.
And it's definitely a time when a lot of the European clubs and the MLS clubs as well were looking at what does global expansion look like, how do we reach other markets, those kind of things. So we're doing more and more tours, weren't they?
100%. Look, I'm really, really fortunate that moving into the international games and being part of, probably 50, 60% of the amount of games that have happened here over the last 12, 13 years, and all of them are, would be deemed to be a success on whichever KPI you look at.
Yep.
A success for the Australian market. The fans have enjoyed and come out in big numbers. Very importantly, now the clubs from overseas are looking at their footprints in new markets, and Australia is a very lucrative market, although our population is very small. If I can just throw a stat in, Liverpool came out in 2014 and played in front of... in 2013, actually, at the MCG, they played in front of 96,000 people. Stevie Gerrard, they sold their biggest amount of merchandise in a 24-hour period in that 24 hours leading up to the MCG game in the history of the Liverpool Football Club.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show you, while our population might be small compared to other parts of the world, when it comes to football, we're big.
Yeah, our fervour for sport is unrelenting.
Unrelenting and probably unmatched on a per capita basis.
Yep.
So it's a long-winded answer to how we got to Football for Fires. In following social media as I do, a bit of a social media junkie, it's really interesting to follow some sportsmen and particularly footballers. And a lot of these footballers that I follow are actually really good global citizens.
Yep.
By that, they tend to comment on things that are happening around the world. And we're in the midst of this crazy period of devastation in our country. The place is literally on fire. And watching and following these big players from around the world, one in particular that really stuck with me was Claudio Marchisio, ex-Juventus and Italy World Cup player, who was constantly tweeting about the bushfires and what's the world doing and we've got to do something about this. And I woke up one morning and I thought, F this, I'm going to do something about it.
Yep.
So the first person I called is a guy called Daryl Kerry. Daryl's the CEO of ANZ Stadium. Why did I call Daryl? Because Daryl's company, apart from managing ANZ Stadium, they manage Optus Stadium in Perth and now the new Bank West. So over the years, we've done a lot of business together. And I said, Daryl, I've got an idea. I need a stadium. We should put this game on. He said, Lou, whatever I can do to help you, you got the stadium. Go for it.
Yep.
And so from that point, I launched into a series of phone calls. I called all the people that I'd done business with, both at club level and at manager level. I'd ring David Beckham's management company and say, look, I know David's pulled in a million different directions. We're going to have a game. Want to get him out here. What can we do?
Yep.
And I did that with clubs and CEOs, and in the midst of all this, we started having conversations with Red Cross Australia. So they've set up a fund specifically for Football for Fires. Start putting the game together. We've locked in the date. We've locked in the venue. We've locked in a raft of players that have already committed, and we've actually already commenced fundraising activities.
Yep.
So where clubs have said, Lou, what can we do to help you? Well, can you donate some money? We know the first big donation we had for Football for Fires through the Red Cross was Celtic Football Club. Amazing. Followed by Rocco Commisso, who people might not know in Australia, is a very, very successful American-Italian businessman who runs the third or fourth largest media group in the States and has owned the New York Cosmos for the last 6 or 7 years, and has just recently acquired Fiorentina out of Florence. They made a substantial donation. They started dealing with clubs in the A-League. Sydney FC had an auction a couple of weekends ago and raised $10,000. So the football community has really started to band together. And that was really important for me because it was really not so much about rounding up 30 Aussie players to play. Yep. It was more about what's the international community going to do, the international football community that I've had a lot to do with.
Yep.
And in many cases, I've made them a lot of money. I've made these clubs a lot of money on these tours out to Australia. So I've thrown it back to them and I said, guys, the country needs you.
Yeah.
What's the international football community going to do?
And was that part of the reasoning of pushing it the date to May? Because so far we've had a bushfire cricket match, we've had a bushfire concert at ANZ Stadium as well recently. Pushing it out to May, was it to give you a bit more runway to be able to make these and also find the right window to be able to get some of these players?
In actual fact, Sean, it was going to be the 6th of June.
Yep.
And then our friends at FFA said, Lou, could you move it away from that date because I think there's a World Cup qualifier that might now have been postponed anyway, as fate would have it. But on the 9th, it's a little bit crowded, and obviously we're all in the football community. We work together. So spoke to the FFA, spoke to the stadium. Lou, we've got availability on the 23rd, so we settled, which happens to be FA Cup night out of the UK. So football's a pretty congested calendar anyway.
Yeah.
Decided that we'd go for the 23rd of May. Probably the reason to push it out so long was that at that time I hadn't actually crystallised the mix of players that I was going to be inviting, and I think my thinking at the time was probably to invite players that were actually still playing, not necessarily retired players, but players that were playing. So, or coaching, for instance, Stephen Gerrard's coaching at Rangers. No point in inviting him to come out in February when he's coaching. So the reason for pushing it out to May was to enable people from overseas to make it over.
Yep. And so, like I said, we are recording this a couple of days before the Australian Grand Prix. The coronavirus updates are happening on an hourly basis. I woke up this morning and the NBA is planning to potentially have games without fans. Pulling together a game like this is its own logistical nightmares. But then you've got, the coronavirus coming in. What challenge does that put to you for an event that's in May? And we're getting these updates, like I said, by the minute. We could check our phones after this interview and there could be a whole bunch of changes.
Well, I've people that know me know that I've got real thick skin. And working in this industry, you've got to wake up every day with a really positive attitude because there's always a stumbling block. So this is a big challenge. But for us, I'm not saying we're immune, but we're not severely affected to date because we're not bringing in a particular team to play from a particular market. Strategically, we've invited players from all corners of the globe. And if the game was today, for instance, it could very well be that Marchisio can't come because Italy's one of the countries that have been locked down.
Yep.
But if we were holding the game today, the chances are 95% of the players that I've invited could still make it because they come from countries where travel is still free.
Yeah.
Okay. So fast forward 23rd of May, no one really knows what the world's going to look like then. I still believe that we'll have enough of the players available to put on a good show. Now, the only scenario that could change is that the Australian government could turn around and say, okay, no more AFL crowds, no more NRL crowds.
Which is pretty much what the City of San Francisco has done in the last 6 hours as we record
Correct.
this, where they've said no more gatherings of more than 1,000 people.
Correct.
And so that's going to force, potentially the Warriors to be playing games in an empty stadium. Like that's currently happening in Italy. Games are being played with no fans, which is tragic. Like sports fans like ourselves, I'd much rather be watching the games. But yeah, it might be a reality in the next 6 to 8, 12 weeks.
I watched Juve Inter Milan the other night.
Yeah.
Battle for top spot with no crowd. I actually quite enjoyed it because I thought the Juve players played without pressure.
Yeah.
So
the anti-home crowd, like you're not feeling the pressure of the fans.
Correct. Look, from our point of view, I've already spoken at length about that scenario. For us, if we have to play the game without fans, it's disappointing. More for the players that are making the effort to come out, but the game will go on because remember, the primary reason for hosting this game is to raise funds, it's to raise awareness, it's to involve the international football community. We haven't announced it as yet, but we've secured free-to-air broadcast for the game or telecast. I'm not sure which is the correct description.
Yep.
The game will be shown on free-to-air.
And that's the thing. So whether you've got the 70 to 80,000 in the stadium, which would be great and create great atmosphere, that is 1% of the audience that potentially will be seeing this game. And so the awareness of it and the global awareness of the issue of the fires and the support that Australia needs is the key outcome. So, broadcasts on TV, and then globally, and people will be able to watch it, and all the social chatter that's going to be around it is the major outcome of the event. It's just going to be disappointing that people won't be able to experience seeing the squad out on the pitch.
Absolutely, and look, I hope that in 8 weeks' time, 9 weeks' time, when the game is set to play, the world might look different. It's actually probably good that countries and leagues are making these moves now.
Yep.
And hopefully in 3 or 4 weeks' time, we might come out of it in a more positive light. But as far as the Football for Fires game, it will go on. Hopefully with the crowd, if we're prevented from having fans inside the stadium, it will be shown on television in Australia on free-to-air. It will be streamed on beIN globally.
Yep.
It will be on pay-per-view with a company called Sports Flick. There are discussions underway as we speak with Twitter about streaming it on Twitter, YouTube, and a couple of other platforms to boot.
Yep.
So this game has attracted a lot of interest from these networks. They love the concept. It will have a significant television audience. And remember, it's about pushing the message. And there are probably more than one message. First, links to donations. It will be a de facto telethon.
Yep.
Where we'll be inviting people from all around the world to make whatever contribution they can make. As small, as big as they like, it doesn't matter. It's bringing the football community together to help a country in a time of need. 2, it's also to get some other messaging across. We're talking to Tourism Australia and other government departments about utilising our foreign players like Didier Drogba showing him that Australia is open for business, notwithstanding the ramifications of the coronavirus.
Well, that's one of the big things. I mean, I think the Tourism Australia went and put out a new tourism ad, and then they had to pull it because effectively 2 weeks later, there was so much fires, and people like even in Australia need to know we should be going to these rural regions, filling our esky and visiting the wineries and the bakeries and supporting them. But then also to our international visitors, I think the Aussie Open tennis changing their brand to Australia is open. They did in the last week of the tennis. I thought it was a really nice touch to, again, do that thing. But, yeah, the tourism message, again, coronavirus withstanding and what travel we can do, the tourism will potentially, is a big part of Australia's economy.
Sean, people overseas don't understand the enormity of this country when it comes to landmass. I flew from the Gold Coast back to Melbourne a couple of months ago, right in the middle of the bushfires, and apart from a little bit of haze, if you had a window seat, I'm looking to see, I couldn't see any fires on the ground. That's not to say that they weren't there. It just goes to show you how big the country is. So it's really important for people overseas to understand that we're open for business. The Sydney Harbour's open, the Opera House is open, the Harbour Bridge is open.
Yeah, Uluru is still in the middle of Australia. They're
still there. Available. The beaches at the Gold Coast are there. And so it's important that people from around the world see Australia as open for business, great tourist destination, and So the game for me personally is more than just a football game. It's about trying to tick as many boxes as possible. We've got a company, and look, the support that we've had, if I can just mention, I know this is not an advertorial, but
that's right.
If I can mention, we had Kappa, who have gone out and designed an incredible shirt.
Yep.
Which is just started to sell like hotcakes. The shirt has a royalty fee that goes to Football Federation Australia's Football Relief Fund. Okay. What that is money to help rural communities that have lost their soccer pitch or their clubhouse, or families that have lost their business, can't afford to pay for their kids' soccer fees.
And that's where I think part of, especially, I think this is truly Australia, and the sporting clubs that are in regional, but even suburban, but in the regional areas, are the fabric of the town. Like, they bring everyone together.
Correct.
And so I think there is, yes, we want people's houses rebuilt and making sure they've got a roof over their heads, but the fabric of a town is so driven by, the footy clubs, the netball clubs and all of that. It's really important.
Correct. Again, we've had Kappa Australia come out and create this incredible design. EA Sports, producers of the biggest football game, FIFA, incredible support. They've put their brand on the back of the shirt. The Football for Fire shirt will actually be played in-game.
Okay, that's really cool.
It's just incredible. So big thanks to the guys up in Sydney at EA. We've had a small company that are producing a soccer ball with an incredible artistry around koalas and kangaroos and other wildlife. So as of yesterday, we've come to a deal where every soccer ball that's sold, there'll be a royalty collected and sent to the RSPCA. So we've got Football Relief Fund, we've got the RSPCA, we've got Red Cross Australia and their relief fund. We're trying to spread the love with as many different recipients as possible. We've had a small but very aggressive growing company called Mate. They're an internet company. People have seen what they've done with Sam Kerr and some of the Australian players playing overseas. They've come on board and contributed a lot of money and a lot of support. So the amount of goodwill is incredible. And I really do hope that the game goes on with fans. But if it happens without fans, so be it. We've had our national coach, Graham Arnold, so enthusiastic about coaching one of the teams. He personally got on the phone and arranged for Gus Hiddink to come out as well to coach the other team.
Aussie Gus, as he's known
Gus
here.
And I offered to that we would cover his flight and hotel, and he said, no, I'm paying my own flight, my own hotel.
Yep.
I want to help the game. it's just an incredible feeling of camaraderie. So I really want this to grow. Obviously, with coronavirus and everything else, we've got to be a little bit demure in how we go out. There are people that are hurting at the moment.
Yep.
We don't want to downplay others and other misfortunes,
Yep.
but we still want the Football for Fires game to make an impact.
Definitely. Well, before I wrap things up, I've got the Sports Geek closing 5. First of all, apologies because I haven't given you these, but I know you can handle these questions. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended? Would have been a match.
Brunswick
Juventus.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. You've been to a few sports events in your time. Do you have a favourite food or a go-to food when you're at a sports event?
Oh yeah, the pork sausages outside of Juventus Stadium.
That would be one that you wouldn't go past. What's the first app you open in the morning?
Twitter.
Is there someone that you either follow or follow on Twitter or read that you suggest the listeners should follow and look up for what they do maybe in the world of football?
I do. This has a very, very big Juventus slant, but funny thing is an Englishman that lives in Manchester, a guy called Adam Digby, who runs a number of podcasts and does a lot of blogging and media articles on other clubs as well.
Okay.
And he seems to be a really level-headed a guy that I enjoy following. So definitely recommend Adam Digby.
You might have spoiled it earlier, but what social media platform is your go-to platform?
Twitter, in some degree. I'm starting to get a little bit sick of the negativity and vitriol.
There's a little bit of that,
Yeah. One that we use a lot for work,
and
it seems to generate a lot of activity is LinkedIn.
Yep.
Very big. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn, and then I'll flirt across every other platform I can get around to.
So what is the best place for people to both connect with you and learn more about Football for Fires?
Footballforfires.com.
Footballforfires.com, and Lou Sticca on all of those platforms is a place to find you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I look forward to seeing how the Football for Fires goes. And, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean.
We'd love your support on our Patreon campaign. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon.
Thanks again to Lou Sticca. Be sure to connect with him on LinkedIn. Like I said, and he said in the interview, becoming a big advocate for LinkedIn. So I will connect with Lou when I put up the post. You can send him a tweet. Let's try to make Twitter a positive place. Lou_Sticca, STICCA on Twitter. You can find this episode, sportsgeekhq.com/272. And remember, you can go to footballforfires.com right now and either buy one of the jerseys or make a donation, and all your efforts will go to the charities that Lou outlined in the podcast. He's really much set it all up to make sure that money goes to people who are in need. So it's going to Red Cross and a few other charities. So go to footballforfires.com. And additionally, Money in Sport is happening in April 30 and May 1st in Brisbane. Stay tuned. There may be a live Sports Geek podcast interview. Hopefully we'll see you at Money in Sport. We did a Money in Esport event last year with Lou and the team. And please, as I said at the end of the interview, please reach out to Lou and tell him that you've listened to this episode. It really means a lot to me. I love hearing from podcast guests 6 weeks, 2 months later, 3 months later, 6 months later when they say, hey, I got a lot of feedback, a lot of great feedback, and they were surprised by the different people that gave them feedback. So if you give them feedback, I find it very valuable, and it's great to hear that feedback from you. So I really appreciate it. I spoke to Adam Hyman recently from Sportility. He was on a recent episode, and we're planning our Gravitas merch launch and some of the things we want to do with the guys at Sportility. And he was absolutely delighted with some of the feedback that he was getting from different industries and different sports and different parts of the world. So, yeah, if you've listened, and you got some value out of it, please reach out to the guest. And again, I'm terribly humbled by reaching the 500,000 download mark. So it's a absolutely humbling number. So thank you very much, one, for listening. Two, if you've left a review on Apple Podcasts, it does help. It does help bump up the ratings. I've actually got a registration with Chartable, and Chartable keeps track of where the Sports Geek podcast is in all the Apple podcast charts around the world. And, it's fascinating to find out that, at the moment, I'm looking at it now, we're 19 we're the 19th ranked podcast in Ireland. And we've just broken the 150 mark in Canada, and we've just gone up with a bullet in Great Britain. So hello to all my friends in the UK. And we're hovering around the 25, 26 mark in the marketing for Australia. So thank you very much if you're using iTunes, or if you're using Apple Podcasts. All of those things help, and I think it does help more people find it. But I think if you've passed it on to a friend, if you've passed it on with word of mouth, that actually has the most effect. So again, very, very happy and very thankful for everyone who has passed it on. Very thankful for the guests that have been on the podcast, like Lou. So thank you very much. Just before I wrap up, we're taking in more questions for the Q&A episodes. I'll be recording a new batch this week. You can go to sportsgeekhq.com/questions, or you can send me an email, Sean@sportsgeekhq. I'm happy to take those questions anytime. And as always, the only thing I like doing more than interviewing people and having a chat and getting feedback from people about the podcast is working with people who've listened to the podcast. So if you've got a problem, if you would like my help, I've said it already this year, this is the year I want to work on big problems. I want to solve big problems. If you think you've got a big problem, if you've got something you want to tackle in your digital data, commercial sponsorship sort of space, let's book in a time for a call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call. It's all virtual. It's all online. There's no concerns about coronavirus by doing it all online. And I can work with anyone in the world. I'm not trying to make light of coronavirus. I know it is potentially going to be devastating to the sports world. And I'm recording this a couple 24 hours after the NBA suspended their season. And just this morning I was meant to be headed off the Grand Prix, and the Australian Grand Prix has been cancelled. So it is going to cause a lot of issues in the world of sports, and I'm going to sort of dive in on that over the next couple of episodes. But it really does make everything you're doing from a comms and a digital point of view really, really important. So if you want to have a phone call, simply go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call. Until next episode and onward to the next 500,000 downloads, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Join Sports Geek Nation access to exclusive Slack and Facebook groups with regular Q&A sessions with Sean Callanan. Go to sportsgeeknation.com to join. Got a question for Sean? Send it in for our Sports Geek Q&A series. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/questions. Go to sportsgeekhq.com for more sports digital marketing resources.